Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, CineRam. I'm Scott, of course, and I wanted to acknowledge a couple of people who subscribed to me recently. I think I got 3 new subscribers in the last week. Thank you very much. I appreciate that quite a bit. I'm not associated with Google+, so commenting and responding to comments is not really something that is easy for me. However, in the link below in the description, if you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, is to my CineRam Facebook page, and you can comment there and give me feedback, stuff like that. That would be awesome if you want to do that. Luke, aka Razorwire Reviews, had a conversational thread on Facebook recently, which is talking about making a list of his top 250 movies of all time, his favorite 250 movies. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun, but I don't think that I could do a whole 250. That's a lot. I don't know how I could possibly narrow it down. But I made a list, and I got it basically to about halfway at that point, about 125, 130 movies, and then I basically hacked off 30 of them. And so I got 100 basically, and even 100 movies. And so I wanted to share those with you. I'm not going to talk about them at great length, keep this video relatively short, but instead of listing them 100 through 1, or alphabetically or something like that, I wanted to break them up into a little bit more interesting categories. Let me start with childhood favorites of mine. These are movies that I saw, for the most part, before I entered high school. That's what I would consider my childhood. Alice in Wonderland from the 1950s, the Disney animated movie, really fun film. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial from Mr. Spielberg. Ghostbusters. Innerspace, which is a sci-fi comedy by Joe Dante. Raising Arizona by Joel and Ethan Coen. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, Star Wars Episodes 4 and 5, A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, and you can kind of include Return of the Jedi in there as well. I don't think it's as good a movie, I don't enjoy it as much as the other two, but I was super big on all things Star Wars when that movie came out. I was 10 years old when Return of the Jedi came out, so it's part of that, really. Superman II. There were 4 Christopher Reeve Superman movies that came out, and Superman II is probably my favorite because of the ending, when Christopher Reeve is told by Zod, kneel, and he kneels, and then Zod says, take my hand, and he takes his hand, and then what happens after that is totally awesome, like a really great moment. Superman, the first one is arguably the better movie, but Superman 2, has that crowd-pleasing stuff in it with the Kryptonian supervillains. And of course it has the best stuff between Superman and Lois Lane, the best scenes between them as well. Who Framed Roger Rabbit actually came out after my freshman year, but I want to include it here just because it's like the Disney type thing. Really great movie from Robert Zemeckis. And of course, classic of all classics is The Wizard of Oz. I know that's Forkaball's favorite movie, and it's been one of my favorites for a very long time. Saw it on TV when I was a little kid, watched it, it was an occasion. Every time it was on, we would watch it when it's broadcast on TV, and yeah, to this day it remains a favorite film of mine. I wanted to also mention that my favorite Disney hand-drawn animated movie would be Aladdin. And that my favorite computer animated movie is Toy Story 3. Of course, I'm big on other movies like The Incredibles as well, Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, I've had a few favorites, and that more so than, say, hand-drawn animation. Because while I got caught up on a lot of those older films, yeah, the computer animated ones tend to be, I don't know, more exciting on some level, and less music, I suppose. Although I wouldn't discount Alice in Wonderland for its music because it has a lot of good songs in it. My favorite documentary is Roger and Me by Michael Moore, and my favorite mock documentary is Bob Roberts, directed by Tim Robbins. It's a really good movie. It came out in the early 90s. Before I go any further, I just wanted to mention that I limited myself to anything that came out before 2011. So like 2010 and back, that's the field that I'm working with right here. Anything more recent than that, I haven't really experienced it, known it long enough to really call it one of my favorites, but there are at least 3 movies from 2010 that I would call my favorites, so I sort of drew the line there, nothing more recent than that. And also, obviously, these are favorites of mine, it's the best, because I could have gone through my top 10 lists from the 90s and the last decade and just, taken the top 5 from each one of those and had 100 right there, but that's really not the case. I mean, a lot of these movies that I would consider to be the best, ones that I admire, aren't necessarily the ones that I love so much and could watch over and over and over again. Those are my favorite movies, even though they're not all perfect. They're, you know, movies that I really, really adore quite a bit. So that was sort of my criteria here. As far as the time frame goes, 29 of the movies on my 100 are from the 80s, and 40 are from the 90s, and 23 are from the aughties. And prior to that, everything before 1980, there's only like 8 movies on there. I know there's a bunch of classic movies that I haven't seen, but even if I were to watch tons of classic movies, very few of them would probably be my favorites because, you know, I'm more interested in the contemporary stuff. I wanted to also mention, as far as directors go, I have sort of a sub-list here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Whenever I talk for a long time, my throat gets kind of dry. Had this problem yesterday too. Here's a list of favorites of mine, each from a different director. My favorite movies by each of these directors: James Cameron, Aliens; Robert Zemeckis, Back to the Future; Christopher Nolan, Batman Begins; Richard Linklater, Before Sunset; David Cronenberg, The Fly; Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas, which could be my #1 favorite movie of all time. #1, yes, #1. Peter Jackson, Meet the Feebles, his twisted Muppet movie that he made before the Lord of the Rings movies. Joel and Ethan Coen, Miller's Crossing. Steven Soderbergh, Out of Sight, with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. Robert Rodriguez, Planet Terror. Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course. Quentin Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs. Paul Verhoeven, RoboCop. That's the original, of course, from 1987, not the remake. Oliver Stone, David Fincher, Seven. Oliver Stone, Talk Radio. It's kind of a lower profile movie of his, but definitely my favorite. Ridley Scott, Thelma and Louise. Tony Scott, True Romance, I always said something else. Terry Gilliam, 12 Monkeys. Yes, Terry Gilliam, my favorite movie by him is 12 Monkeys. And Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. The Western that won him Best Director and Best Picture and what have you. Here's another grouping here that I wanted to mention. These are movies that were recommended to me. Some of these movies, obviously the ones from my childhood, were determined for me by other people. Mostly my parents. They would say, hey kids, we're going to get in the car and go see this movie, and then I would enjoy it. There's one friend of mine, his name is Matthew, that I was closest with in high school, and he really sort of expanded my palette and encouraged me to be more adventurous in the movies that I chose. And there are a few movies on my list that were recommended by him specifically. After Hours, which is a Martin Scorsese comedy. I didn't know that he did this movie. I was aware of him through Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and stuff like that. Didn't know that he'd done a madcap comedy. But yeah, that's a really good one. Brazil by Terry Gilliam. Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick. Evil Dead 2 by Sam Raimi. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the Clint Eastwood Western by Sergio Leone. Head, which is a musical starring the Monkees and directed by Bob Rafelson. Very, very surreal and wacky movie. And a documentary called Koyaanisqatsi, which is has no interviews, no narration or anything like that. It's just imagery and music, and it's wonderful. Luke actually did a review of the Blu-rays a couple of months ago, which was really cool. Also, I want to mention a couple other movies that Matt could have recommended to me. This is the kind of movies he would recommend, but I don't think that he did. I probably just saw them on my own. One of them is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, which is a low-budget horror movie that was shot here in Chicago, and another David Cronenberg movie called Videodrome, which is probably the first trailer I actually remember seeing. I've saw trailers, of course, in front of every movie, but Videodrome was so creepy that I remembered it very, very vividly, long after all the other ones had faded. So yeah, that was his contribution, and you know, I've seen a lot of movies based on his recommendations. My friend Matthew, but those are the ones that I like the best. Let me go through just the rest of the list here, grouped by decade. For the 80s, I've got Dead Poets Society, Die Hard, the original, Full Metal Jacket, the Stanley Kubrick Vietnam picture, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Soderbergh's first film, Stormy Monday, which is the first feature film done by Mike Figgis, who did Leaving Las Vegas, Switching Channels is a comedy with Kathleen Turner and Burt Reynolds and Christopher Reeve. Very, very high energy, really fun movie. The Terminator, the original Terminator from James Cameron. The War of the Roses, which was another Kathleen Turner movie. Dark comedy with Michael Douglas and was directed by Danny DeVito. My favorite movie that he's done as a director. Danny DeVito, I mean. From the 90s, another Richard Linklater movie, of course, Before Sunrise. Martin Scorsese's remake of Cape Fear. The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, which had Michael Gambon and Helen Mirren in it. It's an English film. Dark City by Alex Proyas. Election with Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon. Flesh and Bone, which was a drama that reunited the stars of Innerspace. The Joe Dante movie I mentioned earlier had Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan the leads, and of course they were together at that time, and they made this other movie, Flesh and Bone, which I like very much. Forrest Gump, y'all know what that one is. Glengarry Glen Ross, the David Mamet movie with Al Pacino and Kevin Spacey and Ed Harris, Jack Lemmon. LA Story, a Steve Martin comedy. A League of Their Own with Gina Davis and Madonna and Rosie O'Donnell and Tom Hanks in one of his funniest performances ever. The Limey, another Soderbergh movie with Terrence Stamp. The Man in the Moon, Reese Witherspoon's debut movie, always a longtime favorite of mine. Miami Blues, a really dark comedy with Alec Baldwin and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Really, really fun movie. Midnight Clear, a World War II movie that's directed by Keith Gordon. He starred in Christine, the Stephen King movie Christine. He was an actor before he became a director. And this is a movie with Peter Berg and Ethan Hawke and Gary Sinise and a few other people. It's a really, really terrific war picture. Mystery Men, the comedy with Ben Stiller and Janine Garofalo and Hank Azaria, William H. Macy, all those guys. Really, really funny movie. Pulp Fiction by Mr. Tarantino. Ransom, the thriller by Ron Howard with Mel Gibson. Schindler's List by Spielberg. Scream, the original Scream by Wes Craven. The Shawshank Redemption with Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. Richard Linklater's debut movie, Slacker. South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Starship Troopers, Paul Verhoeven. Actually, his other two sci-fi movies, Total Recall and RoboCop, got remakes, and this one might get a remake as well. I'm not pleased about that. Total Recall, another favorite of mine. Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie, in my opinion, the most exciting movie he's done. Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, which is a big screen spin-off of David Lynch's TV series. Your Friends and Neighbors, which is an ensemble drama by Neil LaBute. It's got Jason Patric, Ben Stiller, Catherine Keener, Amy Brenneman, a few other people. The Usual Suspects by Bryan Singer, and Zero Effect, which is about Bill Pullman and Ben Stiller as private detectives. It's a really good movie. For the Audies, the 2000 through 2010, that's this last category here. A horror movie, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Cecil B. Demented by John Waters. Children of Men with Clive Owen and directed by Alfonso Cuarón. Deja Vu, the time travel thriller by Tony Scott with Denzel Washington. The Departed, Martin Scorsese again, Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, all those guys. Good Night and Good Luck, which is directed by George Clooney, has David Strathairn as Edward R. Murrow. Inception by Christopher Nolan. The Incredibles, the Pixar movie. Kill Bill Volume 1 by Mr. Tarantino. The Life of David Gale with Kevin Spacey, directed by Alan Parker. Memento, Christopher Nolan again. Moulin Rouge, the musical by Baz Luhrmann with Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman. Serenity by Joss Whedon, the big screen spin-off of Firefly. The Social Network, Mr. Fincher again, Mark Zuckerberg, all those guys. Time Code, an ensemble comedy, again by Mike Figgis. United 93, the Paul Greengrass dramatization of the hijacking on September 11th. V for Vendetta with Natalie Portman and Hugo Weaving, and produced and written by the Wachowskis, adapted from the Alan Moore graphic novel. Wall-E by Pixar again. What Lies Beneath by Robert Zemeckis with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. Y Tu Mama Tambien, Alfonso Cuarón again, the Mexican film. And David Fincher, one more David Fincher film, Zodiac, with Jake Gyllenhaal and Mark Ruffalo looking for the serial killer. So there's my 100 list. I think the count is correct on that. That's 100 movies right there. And I hope you enjoyed that. And I would put the list on Letterboxd, like some other guys have done, but the problem with Letterboxd is unless you review each one of those movies, it acts like you haven't actually seen them, and I don't get that at all. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. And I look forward to seeing anybody else that does the video on their big lists like this. 200, 300, 500, whatever. Look forward to it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.